So we'll continue with oneness versus the 1%. So oneness versus the 1%, one humanity. We are one earth family, one humanity. We are connected through our diversity, intelligence, creativity and compassion. For the first time in human history, our common future as a species is no longer certain. In just 500 years of colonisation, including 200 years of fossil fuel age and 20 years of corporate globalisation, humanity has done more damage to the earth to ensure its own extinction. The blindness of the 1% to the potential of life, to the rights of people, to the destructive impact of their constructs, has ensured that going over the precipice is inevitable. They define their destructive colonising powers as superior, while the creative, non-violent forces of nature and of women, indigenous people and farmers is perceived as backwardness, as passivity. In their constructed narrative of linear progress, there is only one way forward, and when you are already standing at the precipice, going forward means hurtling down. Our common and indivisible freedoms through our diversity are being threatened by the freedoms that the 1% have created for themselves through free trade agreements, tools of mass manipulation, and the enclosure of the commons through patents. They are consolidating further by enforcing uniformity and monocultures, division and separation, monopolies and external control, centralisation and coercion, and imposing their paradigms and narratives undemocratically on the world. The economically and politically powerful 1%, disconnected from the earth and humanity, including their own, are trying to control every sphere of our lives. Diversity and our interconnected freedoms. Oneness is the very source of our existence, our interconnectedness with the universe, with all beings, including human beings, and with our local communities. Oneness is woven through our diverse living intelligence and creativity. It represents the confluence of our rich and vibrant diversities, biodiversity, cultural diversity, economic diversity, political diversity and knowledge diversity. It is based on the deep understanding that life and freedom are one, that our freedom as humans and as members of the earth community is not separable from the freedom of the earth. Trees and plants provide human beings with oxygen, and humans and other animals provide the necessary carbon dioxide in the living carbon cycle. Trees create the conditions for our freedom. The mycorrhizal fungi in the soil provide nourishment to plants and derive their own nourishment from them. The freedom of the plants is dependent on the freedom of the mycorrhizal fungi. The soil rich in organic matter has abundant beneficial fungi which are useful to plants and ultimately to humans and animals who consume them. Our freedom to live and thrive are interconnected. Concern and care for our seeds, our soil, our air and our water are the real test of our commitment to our future. The processes that are killing our soil, our biodiversity, our air, water and climate balance are also killing our humanity. Compassion arises naturally from connectedness and the consciousness of being interconnected. It is not the philanthropy of billionaires because their billions are made through the violent economies of extraction and because they use their billions in philanthropy to create more markets and make more money. Above all, philanthropy is not compassion, because it assumes that money is the only human currency. This is an emergency, and yet our response does not address the root cause of the crisis we are facing. We are at a critical junction in the evolution of the planet and in our evolution as a species. More than 90% of crop varieties have disappeared. Some 75% of plant genetic diversity has been pushed to extinction by the monocultures of the mechanical mind. We are living in the age of the sixth extinction. This is the moment where we need to rejuvenate biodiversity on our farms and in our fields, in our kitchens and on our plates, to address the climate crisis, the health crisis, the crisis of corporate control over our food. According to poet and philosopher Rabindranath Tagore, the distinctiveness of Indian culture is in it having defined life in the forest as the highest form of cultural evolution. In his essay Tapovan, he writes, "Contemporary Western civilization is built on brick and wood. It is rooted in the city, but Indian civilization has been distinctive in locating its source of regeneration, material and intellectual, in the forest, not the city. Indians' best ideas have come where man was in communication with trees and rivers and lakes. Away from the crowds, the peace of the forest has helped the intellectual evolution of man. The culture of the forest has fueled the culture of Indian society. The culture that has risen from the forest has been influenced by the diverse processes of renewal of life which has always at play in the forest, varying from species to species, from season to season, in sight and sound and smell. The unifying principle of life in diversity of democratic pluralism thus becomes the principle of Indian civilization. Forests are the storehouse of biodiversity and can teach us lessons in democracy, of sharing space with others while drawing substances from the common web of life. Democracy is participation, and since participation is embodied, not disembodied, participatory democracy is lived, and living democracy. We must build a movement to recognise the rights of nature and Mother Earth and the violations of these rights as ecocide. Life is self-organised. Life is intelligent. Every cell, every microbe, every being is autonomous and autopoietic, self-organised and free, dynamic and evolving, interconnected and non-separable. Scientists Humberto Maturana and Francisco Varela have identified living systems as autopoietic, organised from within. Machines, on the other hand, are allopoietic systems, assembled and controlled externally. One of the most dramatic ontological shifts of our time is redefining living organisms, especially seeds, as machines invented by corporations. Over 2 centuries of the fossil fuel-driven industrial age, an intellectual architecture has been created which artificially separates us from the earth and from each other. I have called it eco-apartheid, the imagined separation between humans and nature. Bruno Latour calls it the parteniting of deepening an imaginary gulf between nature and culture. In the dominant mechanistic paradigm, not only are humans separated from nature, nature is declared dead, inert matter, mere raw materials for exploitation. The mechanist worldview was crafted to serve industrial capitalism, which elevated an inadequate reductionist mechanistic paradigm to the level of science, while scientists thought, based on the awareness of a living earth, was politically relegated to non-scientific, even anti-science. Ecological and social ignorance combined with greed and the urge to dominate and control has given us the dominant economic, political, scientific, technological system that the 1% use to rule the world today. When our age is called Anthropocene, it refers to the power of humans to disrupt the Earth's ecological processes. Excuse me. It would be arrogant and irresponsible to claim that the power of destroying gives some humans the right to take over the Earth's resources, processes and systems. If we are alive today, it is because the Earth is alive and creates the conditions of our lives. To be alive on this beautiful planet is to live in the ecocene. The arrogance of colonialism and industrialism lies in assuming that only the colonizers has intelligence, whereas real intelligence is signified by evolutionary and ecological intelligence. It has, like everything else, been reduced to mechanical, analytical intelligence. It is now further outsourced as artificial intelligence. Not only have we been reduced our intelligence to just one form shaped by the mechanical minds, the anthropocentric, the mechanistic bias in science has blinded us to the pervasiveness of living intelligence. English botanist Sir Albert Howard, who came to India in 1905 to introduce Western systems of farming, instead found extremely sophisticated systems which had sustained Indian agricultural over the millennia. He decided to make the local peasants and pests his teachers on good farming practices. The Agricultural Testament was a synthesis of his learning and is now referred to as the Bible by modern organic farming. Among the key lessons he learnt were those of diversity and the law of return. Sustainable agriculture is based on diversity, integrating different crops, trees and animals on a farm. Excuse me. Diverse crops produce diverse nutrients for the soil and for animals as well as humans. The law of return is based on giving back to nature and society what we receive from them. Howard applied his scientific training to understand the ecology of the soil based on the practice of the law of return and evolved the famous method by composting known as the indoor method. The loss of biodiversity in our fields and from our diet due to the spread of the Green Revolution and the industrial agriculture over the last 50 years is not just contributing to the ecological crisis, it is leading to a disease epidemic. Plants are the very basis of life. The tradition of seeing trees and plants as living was continued in modern times by the eminent Indian scientist J.C. Bose, who conducted detailed experiments to show that the impulse of humans and animals for undisputed superiority over their hitherto vegetative brethren did not bear the test of close inspection, according to him. These experiments bring the plants much closer to humans than we ever thought. We find that it is not a mere mass of vegetative growth, but that its very fibre is instinct. With sensibility, we are able to record the throbbing of its pulsing life and find that these wax and wane according to the life conditions of the plant and cease in death of the organism. In these and many other ways, the life reaction to plants and man are alike. Eating is an act of communication. In eating, we communicate with the earth. the farmer, the chef. Our food communicates with the beneficial bacteria in our gut, which enables us to maintain our health and increase our resistance to disease. Our gut is a microbiome which contains 100 trillion microbes and 1,000 bacterial species with more than 7 million genes. For every human gene, there are 360 bacterial genes in our body. Only 10% of the cells in the human body are human. There are 100,000 times more microbiome in our gut than people on the planet. The bacteria are intelligent. James Shapiro has called bacteria sentient beings, according to him. Bacteria possesses many cognitive, computational and evolutionary capabilities. Studies show that bacteria utilizes sophisticated mechanisms for intercellular communication and even have the ability to commandeer the basic cell biology of higher plants and animals to meet their basic needs. This remarkable series of observations requires us to revise basic ideas about biological information processing and recognise that even the smallest cells are sentient beings. The poisonous pesticides and herbicides we use in our foods destroy the beneficial bacteria in our gut, leading to serious diseases from intestinal disorders to neurological problems such as autism and Alzheimer's. Centers for Disease Control (CDC) data show that on current trends, 1 in 2 children in the US will be found to be autistic in a few decades. It is not an intelligent species that destroys its own future because of a distorted and manipulated definition of science, as system thinker Yanir Bar-Yam has written. A complex system is formed out of many components whose behaviour is eminent. The behaviour of the system cannot be simply inferred from the behaviour of its components. Eminent properties cannot be studied by physically taking a system apart and looking at the parts. Reductionism. Mechanistic reductionism is based on seeing the world as a machine and knowledge based on separation as the only knowledge that counts. Karl Rose called mechanistic reductionism a fundamentalist reductionism. He says we need to distinguish what we call empirical reductionism from fundamentalism reductionism. Empirical reductionism is in essence methodologically. It is simply a mode of analysis, the dissection of biological entity or system into its constituent parts in order to better understand it. Empirical reductionism makes no assumptions about the fundamental nature or ultimate understanding of living things. Fundamentalistic reductionism, the reductionism of the 19th century classical physics, on the other hand, it is in essence metaphysical. It is ipso facto a statement about the nature of the world. Living systems, like all else, can be completely understood in terms of the properties of their constituent parts. The knowledge we need for breeding, selecting, evolving seeds and growing food is the knowledge of biodiversity and living seeds, of living soil and living food web, of interconnected connection between different species in the agroecological system and of different seasons. This complex knowledge of interacting, self-organising, self-maintaining, self-renewing and self-evolving systems that farmers have contributed to over 10,000 years of evolution of agriculture is now being validated through agroecology, the truly scientific approach to food production. Farmers have used available land and water to feed humanity for millennia, constantly evolving tastier, more nourishing varieties. Their success lies in their understanding of the earth, nature and her ecosystems, human beings and all other species. An autopoietic system, a grandmother who knows how to transform the crops from our fields into delicious nutritious meals, is a food scientist. An Ayurvedic doctor is a scientist. Indigenous people are scientists, women are scientists. They have embodied interactive and evolving knowledge. We need to recognise the diversity of epistemologies and knowledge systems that have helped us in protecting the planet and ensuring our well-being. We need to unleash our diverse, interconnected intelligence to create another imagination and through it another world beyond the illusions and control of the 1%. So I will leave it there because I am going to do these videos in 20-minute bite sizes.